Bland dialogue has never been more stale. Hello there guys, my name is Squawker and welcome to the Lethal RPG War review. Given that this game has its demo version on Congregate, which if you didn't know is a website like Newgrounds where you go to play Flash games, this can already be quite telling on what level of quality to expect here. Now there are Flash games out there which can go to pretty impressive levels of details using Flash technology, which is somewhat less advanced and capable than using other engines than Unity or Unreal, and there are others where you could say it looked like the game was designed in Microsoft Paint, and you probably wouldn't be wrong. Lethal RPG falls somewhere in the middle with passable graphics, but nothing that really captures the imagination, and also within the game there are quite a few noticeable flaws and complaints which developed as the game progressed. Overall, the level of detail on stuff does show some level of thought has gone into designing characters, weapons and environments, but at the same time there are gaping oversights, and oh yeah, this may also be due to the limits of running on a Flash game engine, which does become apparent with a majority of animations within the game and quite a few of the characters being heavily recycled. Like seriously, you fight the same friggin' dragon like 5 times and all I do is just change one colour. I mean, come on, but combat animations in this game carry literally no weight to them since they are quite slow, floaty in a way. The characters just kind of slide across the battlefield to strike, and it just makes it seem like the battle is taking place on a very well waxed dance floor or an air hockey table. Character designs vary in quality, and while the age of pretty much all the characters is never disclosed in the game, going on art style alone, I'd say these characters don't look much older than being in their teen years, and I'm tempted to say they may as well be around the 10-year-old to 12-year-old mark, especially with the king, who has the fakest beard in the world. However, at the same time, these characters seem to have had their faces sealed in place with a glue gun, as no one ever expresses or emotes, which does not really help with the characterization, and their idle animation is just bland. But then again, I guess we all do have to possess that grim determination feel, but we'll talk about that in the story. And also, yes, the recycling of environments gets old hat really fast, especially how every cave, mine and castle is totally identical. Also, I've found that some bits of armour can come across as straight up over-designed in a way, which sounds like very contradictory to what I have already said, but some of it is like seriously venturing straight into that Final Fantasy JRPG, this clearly is not practical territory. And also, yeah, the design of enemies is quite efficient, and you can tell at a moment's glance if the enemies are heavies, warriors, assassins or other classes, which is a good touch, and having a few designs for the same enemy does help keep things a little more varied, but at the same time the heavily recycling of some characters, especially dragons like I've said, is just stupid. Also, just one last random point, what is actually with the cleavage windows in this game? Like, is there no literally other way to tell a viewer that someone is a woman rather than showing off the you know what I mean, and you know, and I don't mean to say this in a sexist way, but it's just more in the sense that the constant cleavage is, it starts to become kind of awkward and distracting. In a nutshell, this gameplay is functional, but really bland. The base premise is this is a party-based RPG with turn-based combat, and that's actually about it. Let's split this section into 3 parts, however: the overworld, party management, and combat. Starting off with the overworld, it is here that you guide your party across the land of Lokia to reach your objectives, fight battles, do general admin, and take part in side quests. Nothing stands out as particularly wrong with this section, but there are niggles and annoyances which become quite obvious as you progress through the game. The biggest one emerges from the encounters on your journey. Random encounters do not exist within this game, which in a way is a positive point, as nothing pissed me off more than when I was playing Pokemon than being berated by Zubats every other tile I walked. But what you get instead isn't really much of a step forward, it's more of just like a side step. Places where enemies are lying in wait are marked on your map and will forever stand still and wait for you to come to them. And these enemies are scattered relatively evenly across the land and is pretty much always in your way. So there isn't really any much strategy in choosing one route over the other. And the fact enemies don't move, say, around a map like in other games means there is no strategy once more, again, in moving your party around a map. Another annoyance with this phase is also that you can just manually start a battle on any tile, which opens you up to endless and boring XP grinding, but also just amplifies the sense of pointlessness of these random battles in between missions. It's just like random mandatory combat because, yay. And in terms of party management, what you get is pretty basic, but there are some imbalances and annoyances. Firstly, there is the party structure where you will choose which 3 party members you wish to bring into battle. You get a pretty diverse set of classes who each get their own special moves, deal certain types of damage, and can use differing spells during battles. That part is okay, though no class really once more captured my imagination. It's a pretty standard mix of strength, magic, agility. The biggest annoyance with this party management, though, is that Lethal, who is considered story critical, can never be swapped out of a party and must always be in it. This is slightly made up for by giving him a diverse range of attacks, which, you know, can work really well together. But at the same time, it hinders your ability to experiment, and he doesn't really need to be in every encounter unless you're just some madman trying to grind him up to level 50. But at the end of the day, while some classes work really well together, he does end up coming across as the big annoying boulder, which is hindering you from having that unstoppable party build to achieve your objective. Progression is also pretty linear, and party members don't have any opportunity to swap out skills and branch out their specializations, such as in XCOM, for example. But Captain Oh so important Lethal, who must be in every battle, gets more attacks than everyone else. However, you cannot make any combination of his skills that you choose. You are once more hindered by arbitrary fluff and paperwork that makes it really hard to adjust that one person who has to be in every battle to your needs, which means there will be battles where he is pretty much useless. Lastly, but also the least fun to partake in, are battles. The battles play out in turn-based fashion, where all players key in their moves and then the actions are played out in front of you. Now, one would think that this is where some strategy could be used, but would you believe it, through some simple omissions and flaws, the game completely kneecaps the way combat works and makes it more or less a total crapshoot of tedium. Firstly, rolling for initiative is bullshit. Well, okay, you aren't really rolling your dice for initiative, but one may as well be rolled, as the order of which turns are taken seems totally random at times, and there isn't really any way of telling what order people will be taking their turns in apart from memorising them by watching the first turn played out. And since the opening move can sometimes be the critical move that could easily decide if you're going to win or lose this battle, well, you've just gone and shot yourself in the leg, haven't you, Mr. Sucker? So, yeah, you can't plan out your effective strategy, and it makes using potions a no-go zone as well, since all the turns are just taken after you've keyed in your moves. So if you try to administer a potion to someone who's for another character, for example, but that target character then dies before the potion could even be administered, the person who is just sat there holding that potion in his hand with no one to give it to will instead just waste it on themselves, despite the fact they probably don't need it. But at the end of the day, the combat very simply boils down to spamming attacks which confers an element weakness to your opponent and getting those critical hits. And yeah, that's really about it. Nothing special once more. I guess there is a pet mechanic, which is kind of interesting, but at the same time wasn't really explored very well. It was just kind of, yeah, you can swap out a random pet to attach to your main character, and that will just give him one bonus elemental damage. So Yay, flexibility, I guess there's some sort of strategy there. Oh, and also, here's a random fourth category for you. Boss battles. They all suck. All the bosses rely on this one strategy of having a health bar that is 10 times longer than that of a regular enemy, which just makes for more of an endurance test when a battle, which, say, tests your skills and abilities to play this game. Though, honestly, wasn't one boss that I would consider unique, and to be honest, the final boss of this game can go and shove his ginormous health bar up his ass, though I am worried that it's so ginormous it may just come straight out of his mouth. Really good audio can potentially save a game that's going downhill, or at least help it stick in your head, but Lethal RPG really fails to deliver in this department. The music is very bland and does nothing to inspire, and what's more, all of it is looped, and yeah, alright, that's the norm for a lot of games, you know, because, well, yeah, it's easier than having it like procedurally generated, but when your music takes less than a minute to loop, hell, when it takes about 20 seconds to loop, you've got a big issue, and that grows only larger and larger when you have a single audio track for each setting, which, you know, you have a single soundtrack for bosses, a single soundtrack for cutscenes, a single soundtrack for fights, and farting about in the overworld. So this music is not only bland, it gets repetitive, and this game, by the way, it takes quite a bit of time to beat, so combining those elements, you're going to be muting that music or having a ear hemorrhage very, very soon, since it's just overly recycled to a point of extreme annoyance. And also, the boss fights, given how they're massive endurance tests and can honestly take like maybe 10 minutes to beat, and you've got like a 20-minute loop of some music that doesn't even loop very well, its syncing seems to be a little bit off, you're in for a tedious headache. And I'm not just talking about the crappy gameplay of the boss, the music also, right? Anyway, also, sound effects are utter crap and do nothing to develop any kind of atmosphere. The sound for casting a magic spell is the weakest sound I've ever heard for casting a magic spell, and the sound of an attack connected with the enemy is not only recycled endlessly, it doesn't even sound like the kind of noise I would expect, so no marks there. Voice acting is also non-existent within this game, though in a way that's probably actually a good mark, since I honestly cannot imagine voice acting fitting dialogue in this game, which is pretty damn terrible. And I think we're just going to jump on to the next section with that. So, overall, by the way, I can see, you know, obviously there are engine limitations which may be the root of some of these issues, by the way, but at the same time, I honestly feel that I hate to make this accusation or anything, but I do feel like that in this section in particular, the bare minimum of effort was made, which is why we end up with something, you know, I guess at the end of the day it's functional, but is really boring and really, really irritating. Pretty poor is how I'm going to rate this story, and to be fair, I don't want to spend all of my evening picking holes in it, and I neither want to waste your morning, afternoon or evening listening to my hole picking, so here is a heavily condensed nutshell version. It's a very lazily written fantasy story about retrieving some magical shit to destroy an enemy, except every 2 minutes there's a totally unnecessary roadblock which drags the story out further and further and further and further and further, just so every tired out and totally predictable storytelling trope can be crammed in such bullshit betrayals, stupid revelations, which apparently try to make things look not so morally black and right, and utterly fails in its delivery. The main gist is that a so-called Skull Lord has raised the dead and has declared war on the humans, and the humans are losing, but not really, because in no place whatsoever in this tale or game or whatever does the undead enemy come across as a threat. or are seen doing anything threatening, which is not helped by the poor animation, which makes me emoting a no-go zone in all the cutscenes, and makes the bad writing stand out even more, since the delivery is simply awful. And like I said, this game didn't have voice acting, but if I was to imagine voice acting, I can't imagine, like, you know, like a thespian or something making it any good. All I can imagine is someone speaking in, basically with my voice, a very monotone, very flat voice, but there. Now, carrying on with the delivery of the story, it's nothing too different from what has been seen in other similar games, where the dialogue is delivered as speech bubbles from the characters in cutscenes, which are advanced by clicking the mouse. We've all seen that, done that, got the t-shirt, but some games have tried to innovate this delivery method in various ways by including voice acting or interactivity, using highlights, but Lethal RPG does not innovate at all. It's just clicking through reams upon reams upon reams of dialogue, and it's all dialogue, which is totally bland and uninspired with no world building whatsoever throughout this game. I could not have given any less of my time to caring about whatever happens to this world in the end, since it just seems to be a procedurally generated, paper-thin lore of a world, which is just basically exists to support the hero in his adventure to stop the bad guy of the day. Sort of like how Gotham City seems to have every fucking museum and facility going just so Batman has something to do. And now, moving on to the characters themselves, I hate all of them. Not one character in this game is made likeable through their writing, mainly because they all have the exact same personality of grim determination or excessively generic evil, and no one has any motivation or drive apart from, I guess, the wizard, because he has to pull double duty as a grim determined sidekick with no emotions, and a walking encyclopedia full of contrived solutions to all the world's problems. The main character himself, though, I spare some extra bile for, since, for one, his name is Lethal. That's fucking stupid. It does not work into conversation naturally, nor is it easily to take seriously. 2. He is worshipped and feared as the champion of the king and the greatest hero in all the land, but this game does not do anything to demonstrate his reputation, and he is just such an unlikable character as well. Not once did I find myself rooting for him or wanting him to see it make it to the end, which is a fundamental failure of the writing in general of this game. And also, dude, if you're going to have a main hero, he's got to have a flaw to overcome. He can't just be Mr. Perfect. That was, I mean, I'm improvising now. I'm actually not reading my script anymore. Hey, that's something fun to do, improvising, but hubris! Hubris! Give your characters hubris! Otherwise, you can't give a shit about them. Remember, every character has hubris, even, like, Batman. I know everyone says, oh, he's greatest hero, he can, like, snap Superman's neck if he wanted to, but once more, Batman has hubris. He's got tunnel vision. He can go too far because, you know, he wants revenge for his parents and all that. Lethal has no motivation, but yeah. Oh, and not to spoil, by the way, this game also ends with, wouldn't you believe it, a dumb, crap-out, cliffhangery twist. But honestly, I'm now so bored and uninspired by this, I was out of fucks to give at the end of the game, and I just can't be bothered going into it. But it's a warning, if you are some sort of madman who makes it to the end of this game, just be aware there is a really shitty twist there, and it is not only really boring, but you could see it coming from maybe 1,000 meters away, maybe a little bit more. I think it's pretty easy to say that I'm not going to be visiting this game again in a hurry. Hell, I was originally going to actually write about how I would come back to this game to actually do some achievement hunting, since there were quite a few Steam achievements to grab, and to be honest, I like making my average achievement percentage not look like hot trash, and I'm also trying to grind up 1,000 Steam achievements. And I'm not going to say Lethal RPG had good achievements. They all revolved around completing the very boring side quests and defeating the optional and frustratingly boring bosses, see gameplay section for why I hated door boss battles. And then, all of a sudden, this game went free to play, and almost all the achievements were removed for some reason, including the ones that you pick up for completing the main plotline. Yet, the achievement for defeating the final boss was gone, and all we are left with are the really crappy grind achievements, which I feel like exist to try and make Lethal look awesome. But if you think I'm going to be spending another 10 hours of my life grinding that stupid spiky head shit up to level 50, you've got another thing coming. Variable difficulty is also present, but to be honest, I think the only difference it makes is how much health the enemies have rather than anything else, and given that on normal difficulty the bosses already have a piss-take amount of health, I am not interested in playing the hard difficulty or the New Game Plus mode, which seems to do nothing different whatsoever, and I think it just seems to be there because the Batman Arkham games made it kind of popular. There is a kind of alternate game mode as well, in that you can enter your party into the arena in order to win money and other prizes, but that's more of an endurance test, and given how annoying the combat already is, it's not a test I'm very interested in enduring. Collectibles come in the form of rare items used to craft the stupid looking armour, but the only challenge that comes in acquiring them is through the optional boss fights, and once more see previous complaints about boss fights. At the end of the day, this game ticks the bare minimum replay value boxes like all the other bare minimum boxes that are there when manufacturing a game. Yeah, and also let's face it, one playthrough is more than enough time dedicated to this game, and when I say more than enough, I mean too much. And that brings us to the end of this review. So, looking at that score, where do we end up? Well, we end up in second to last place with this game. In a way, I think this game may have scored lower than I expected. When I began writing this, I was honestly thinking this game would just go for a straight 50 score, because it would kind of fit my criteria of a game being functional, but nothing else. But as I continue to write it, unfortunately, it was just below average for the majority of it, and some things were just pretty damn poor. Now, I think I need to do some PR before we wrap up. First things first, no hate on the developer. I mean, it's pretty much done by a one-man band, so it's more than I've ever achieved in my life, so kudos to, you know, you've made a game, well done, well done, well done. But I do feel that maybe, I mean, I know naturally, like, Steam, or, well, not Steam, I mean, I'm talking about Congregate here on Newgrounds. I know those platforms have a heavily limited, like, you know, I think you can only, like, upload so many megs to the to those websites. So yeah, that's probably why, you know, he hasn't been able to put up, you know, his entire game onto there, which in a way is where it's better suited, because what I feel like we got in the end was just basically a game ported from a Flash website to Steam. And when this game was charging money, I think really the consumer at the end of the day wasn't getting the value, because it's just basically playing a very long Flash game. Whereas I know other Flash game designers would just basically, you know, just put several games up in the same, like, canon. But yeah, I mean, the game is now free to play, so given that it's free to play now, I do say, if you are interested, then do feel free to go and give it a check out, because, you know, it's free, so, you know, no harm in doing it, really. But yeah, I have to say, at the end of the day, it's still not a game I would recommend, even if it is free. There are better party RPG games out of there, but you know what? Dude went out and made a game. May not be the best game in the world, but you know what? Nothing ventured, nothing gained, is what I like to say. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. This guy has ventured out and made a game, and he has gained a negative review off me. Now, that was a pretty cruel joke, so I am off to go and lacerate myself for a bit as punishment for doing that. But you know what? The game wasn't brilliant anyway, but if he ever makes another game, all I can say is better luck next time, buddy. I'm sure next time, you know, let your imagination run wild. Don't conform to stuff. And I don't know where I get off giving this kind of advice, but you know, I think that was just what hindered the game. It felt so generic in its lore, its story, its design. That's what was kind of giving it a failure to launch. I mean, apart from, you know, the gameplay issues, but we can look at those another day. But yeah, next time you make a game, my dude, just let your imagination go out there. Just do anything. You could do anything in games. It's a medium where you can do anything, and you know what? I bet you could. Let's just not go for that same old generic stuff we've seen a million billion times and not put a twist on it. Always season your chicken when you cook it, by the way. Put some salt, pepper or paprika on it and it will taste a million times better instead of really, really horribly bland. See you on the next review, my friends. I believe the next game we may be reviewing will be Spore, since I am very close to finishing that game, so I'll see you there for my opinion on that, or any other random game that I solely decides it wants to review first.